What's up, folks? It's Dominic. Welcome back to my channel. I appreciate you being here. Today we're talking about the RX100 Mark VII and why I think it is one of the best cameras that I've ever shot on. So why do I love the RX100 VII so much? Well, I think that so many times in photography and videography, we get caught up with the most professional, the biggest, the best gear, and we shoot these jobs and we make it our living and we do it really, really well, but do we actually photograph our everyday life? Do we photograph our families and our memories and things that are most important to us? And the answer for me is no. I don't want to lug around that giant gear to Disneyland. I don't want to lug around my 70 to 200 to a ball game. It feels like work. It is heavy. It is clunky. I have all this giant gear and I just find myself being lazy and not wanting to take that gear around. And that is where this camera flourishes the most. The RX100 VII is a perfect camera for family, for travel, for vloggers, a B camera, for a video camera, for YouTubers. This YouTube right here is shot on the RX100 VII and you can see how good the autofocus is. I mean, you will not lose me in autofocus. I know I look ridiculous, but look how close and how fast that autofocus is happening. It just doesn't miss, and it is perfect for that. It is absolutely perfect for sticking in your pocket or your purse or your small camera bag and taking with you to Disneyland or taking with you to the park. And shooting family and friends where you wouldn't have that camera, you wouldn't want to bring your pro gear, and really the only camera you're gonna have on you is your iPhone or your cell phone camera. And really, that's where I think this camera competes most, is this camera a better camera than having your phone? The answer to that is yes. This camera can do way more and is way more feature packed than the camera on your cell phone. And that is the reason why I think every photographer and every videographer should have this camera in their bag right now. As always, we're gonna talk about pros and cons and what I think this camera does best and who it is best for. I'm also gonna talk about some competition that this camera has on the market today. First off, I'm gonna run through the features and some of the specs that this camera has, as well as some of the new features that this camera has in regards to the RX100 VII versus the RX100 VI in previous. Now let's talk about some of the pros of this camera. Overall, I love the size, I love the mic jack, I love the flip up screen for vloggers. The 4K video is absolutely gorgeous. I think it is an incredible little camera, and I think they've done an excellent job perfecting this camera over 7 different generations. They have a brand new stacked CMOS 1-inch sensor, which was made specifically for this camera, so they've done a very good job optimizing it and pairing it with the new Bion Z processor. I will say overall, this camera is very efficient. It's a very fast camera. It does everything very speedily. Speedily, is that a word? Hey Google, is speedily a word? Oh, speedily is a word. So it does everything speedily. I find that picking up an RX100 VII and going to my A7R3 or A7 III is very familiar. It's a very easy transition to go from one to the other, and I find it very easy to use, which is what I love most about this RX100 VII. It's very familiar. To me as a professional photographer using high-end Sony gear, this is not that different, and it's just an extension of that gear. Okay, moving on, we have the new sensor. We have the new Bion Z processor. We also have 357 phase detect autofocus points, which bring us to about 70%, 68% of the frame covered in these autofocus points, which is the reason why the system is so wonderful. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. It's got 425 contrast detect autofocus points, which is more than the last generation. We also have optical steady shot, and we have something new called active steady shot, which is a really great feature, wonderful for vloggers especially. That's where you guys will see the benefits most. It also shoots vertical video, which I love for social media purposes. I personally don't do a lot of those yet. I may in the future. I will say I have gotten a few in my testing. I've gotten a few errors where it thought I was shooting vertical and I wasn't, and it did miss a couple times. It's not perfect yet. There may be updates in the future that kind of correct that sort of thing. Brings me to another pro that this camera has. It's very good with connecting to your cell phone. You can quickly and easily send images and videos over. For a small pocketable camera, that's something else. You can quickly take your shot or your video, send it over to your phone, post it on Instagram, and you are done. One of the things I truly love about this camera is the picture profiles that you can shoot in video. Included S-Log2, S-Log3, H-Log Gamma. Gives you really amazing quality if you know how to work and grade that in post. I love that they include it in this little camera, and it really makes it an excellent B camera. And for those of you that are serious in videography, you can really get some beautiful video output out of this camera. I really love it. The slow motion is gorgeous. I would go up to 240 frames per second. Slow motion is really, really nice. Anything above that, I don't think think is very good quality, so it's more of a gimmick to get up to like the 980 or whatever it shoots. I don't really shoot those. I don't like the quality of it, but the slow motion is really gorgeous coming out of this camera. You can get some really nice stuff. I love the flip up screen. It's really high quality, as well as the viewfinder. The pop-up viewfinder is really nice. They've added like a one-click system now where when you just pop it up, it opens, turns the camera on, and you don't need to do the two-stage where you pop it up and then pop it out as well. So it's a really nice feature. Just having a viewfinder in general, I absolutely love as a photographer. The Zeiss 24-200 lens. It is such a point of conversation for this camera, and I personally love it. I think it sets it apart from competing with a cell phone, other pocketable cameras, because those cameras can't get the range that this has. You need to have a digital zoom in your iPhone to get out to that 200 range, and that really sets this camera apart. This is a picture of it zoomed all the way out at 24, and this is a picture of it zoomed all the way in at 200. So you can see the incredible versatility that this lens brings to the table. Now, yes, you lose some speed and low light capabilities. Yes, you lose some bokeh and some shallow depth of field, but those are things that I personally am okay with. Maybe they'll come out with another model next year that has the 24-70 1.8, and I'll buy that one too. Hell, I don't know. For those of you who are complaining about that, just know that going into it, the lens it's a pro and it's a con. We need to talk about what this camera is most known for right now, and that is the autofocus system and the microphone out. What this camera does very, very well is the new autofocus system. That autofocus system that is now in the RX100 VII has trickled down from the pro level A9 body, then the A7 series has now picked it up, and now the RX100 VII, and that makes this camera phenomenal. You will never have to worry about autofocus. It is fast, it is accurate. I have thrown everything at it. I've shot sports, I've shot some wedding stuff with it, I've shot pets with it, I've shot children with it, and it is fast, it is accurate, it doesn't miss. I absolutely love the autofocus system in this camera. For video and for photography, that's what really makes this camera stand out from the rest. I will go as far as to say this camera's autofocus system is comparable, if not better, than any camera in the world, period. That's a big statement for a small pocketable camera. It really just works. It works. You never have to worry about autofocus, and I love that. It doesn't miss. I will say the only time I did see some hunting and some issues with the autofocus system is when I am very, very close to the camera. It is not a very good camera for shooting close. Shooting macro, even if you extend that zoom out, it just doesn't pick up focus very well close distances. Aside from that, if you're arm's length away, for vloggers, you should have no problems with it if you're vlogging out, especially if you're putting on a Joby or something like that. Overall, I will say that the autofocus system has gotten a lot of hype, and it has lived up to the hype completely. I also really love that this camera now has a microphone out jack. You can see I have a lav mic on that I'm running to the camera right now, and you can hear that the audio quality is superb. I love the fact that I now can have the ability to use this as a YouTube studio camera or as a B camera or as a vlogging camera and get good audio. It does lack the cold shoe, I know, or a hot shoe. I know a lot of people online have been complaining about that. Lost that hot shoe in these models when the pop-up flash and pop-up viewfinder came in previous models. I will say, not many people are using the pop-up flash, so I'd much rather see a hot shoe or even a cold shoe up there, but then you'd be blocking the flip-up screen, so you're gonna have issues either way. There are some really cool little microphones that you can use for vlogging. I have one, I'll link it in the link below. I actually found this from iJustine. She's done a really cool audio test on it, and I really love the mic. So that's a really good option for vloggers. And then if you're in studio, you could do a lav, you could do an external shotgun mic, and you can mount that up externally. What do you say we get into some of the cons? Because this camera, although it is great, it does have some cons that really bug me. Biggest flaw, I will say, it is slippery as hell. There is no grip, it is not, there's no texture, there's nothing to really hold on to it. I've dropped it many times, and if I didn't have my wrist strap on, I wouldn't be shooting this video today because my camera would be trash. Very slippery. I don't like that. That's my biggest con. My next con about the RX100 VII is really the low light capabilities. I shouldn't even be grabbing about this because it is a 1-inch sensor, so really any camera with a 1-inch sensor at this size is gonna have these issues. But in low light, especially with this 24-200 lens, with now it's a little bit slower being 2.8 to 4.5, it doesn't hold up in low light very well. You will need to boost your ISO, and I'm noticing a lot of grain, a lot of noise. It holds up to about ISO 2000 and then above that, I get kind of picky and I really don't like the images. You shoot a lot of low light videography and photography, I would say you really need to think long and hard if this camera is for you. It doesn't flourish in low light. That's another big con that it has. On the flip side of that is you get the extra zoom capabilities. So I know there's this big debate on if you'd rather have the 24-70 1.8 zoom lens that they had in previously models, or if you'd rather have the 24-200 2.8 to 4.5. And overall, it's really what your preference is. I think I'd prefer to have the 2.8 to 4.5, but that's because I have other cameras that I can rely on in low light capabilities where I just wouldn't bring this camera out. I would even go so far as to say the new iPhone night mode is probably going to get you better quality photos in low light than this is. Being that 24-200 2.8 to 4.5, you lose that depth of field, so you really aren't going to get those shallow depth of field shots that you would with the 24-70 1.8. So those are big cons and something to think about if you're dropping $12.99, which is the cost of this camera. Now, YouTubers, vloggers, Instagrammers, people shooting a lot in the daytime, I will say that this camera, hands down, is probably the best on the market and it's money well spent. But if you do shoot a lot of sunsets or landscapes or things where you know, you're shooting at night or low lit, and this probably isn't the camera for you. So like always, another gripe that I have is the Sony menu system. At this point, I shouldn't even mention it. It's trash. You really need to know what you're looking for and where you need to go. I constantly Google where to find things in the Sony menu system because I just don't want to waste the time looking for them. So I'm sick of that. Sony has now put a touch screen on this RX100 VII, and that's kind of a new feature, which in theory sounds really great, but it's implemented terribly. It's a big con I have for this camera. Aside from touch to autofocus, I'm really not using the touchscreen at all. In menus, it doesn't work. In reviewing photos and playback mode, you have to double tap to zoom and then you have to move around. You can't pinch to zoom, you can't pinch to rotate. It really is bothersome and not intuitive, especially now that we all have touchscreen phones. We're gonna instinctively pinch. It doesn't work in menus. It doesn't work when you're shooting. It doesn't work when you're reviewing. So overall, I will just say, ignore the fact that it's a touchscreen, aside from the fact that you could touch to autofocus. That's kind of nice to choose autofocus point. Another thing I don't like about this camera is the kind of the gimmicky high frame rate feature that it has. So the high frame rate feature is a con for me because you have to set up all your settings beforehand and you get 90 frames per second for only 7 photos. So 90 frames per second, but you can't shoot a second worth. You can only shoot 7 of those frames. So you're talking about a very, very small time frame where you can capture a moment. And yes, it's a nice feature, but are you going to take the time to set all your settings beforehand, be ready to go and capture what it is you're looking to capture in the very, very small 7 frames? Most likely not, and I think it's more of a bragging or marketing point than to actually utilize. Overall, it just feels a little bit, it's not smooth. It's a little bit clunky, and I don't really love the system overall. On the flip side, I absolutely love that this camera could do time-lapse. You can pre-program the time-lapse in. It also does 4K recording infinitely, so you don't have to have the 5-minute 4K recording limit, which I absolutely love as a B camera. You do have to worry about some overheating issues. They've said that the camera will shut down. That's the setting in there. You set it to shut down with high heat. Like, I don't want the camera to just go until it explodes and then shuts off. Like, that's not very a good feature, but I love that you don't have to worry about the 5-minute cap on 4K video. Another con I have is the lack of a built-in ND filter. We saw that in the RX100 V and previous models. We lost that once they turned to the 24-200 zoom lens. I think there's just not enough room for physics to be able to fit that in there. So we do have to go to an external ND filter. For those of you shooting in daytime or vloggers that want a shallow depth of field as possible, if you want to open up, you're going to need an ND filter. I really wish it did have an internal ND filter, but I understand the reasons why they don't, and I'm okay with that. Overall, that is it for the cons. There's not many. ND filter, shallow depth of field, and low light capabilities. The touchscreen is trash, and the menu is not very good, but those things are not enough to make me not buy this camera. Unless I specifically am shooting in low light, the rest of that I can deal with and adapt to. And I think those cons are not something that you should have to worry about. My camera just died, so I had to replace the battery, which brings me to another con, which is battery life. The batteries on these cameras are small. Surprise, surprise, it's a small camera. So the battery life is pretty poor, especially when shooting 4K like I am right now. Get yourself 2 or 3 Wasabi batteries and a couple extra chargers. Have them all charged up to get you through the day shooting 4K. The biggest con to this camera is the price. $1,299 gets you a lot of camera, especially on the used market. Is this camera enough for you to drop $1,299? And have you shopped around and looked at other features? I think yes, it is. It is a wonderful camera. It is the best for this size. but that is a big con. Let's quickly talk about some of the cameras that compete with the RX100 VII. Canon just dropped the G7X Mark III, which is probably the closest competitor, although it's significantly less expensive at $799, $849, somewhere in that range. G5X Mark II is also competitive with this camera. I will say this, both of those cameras are kind of trash. I should do a review on those. I've used the G7X Mark III. I had the G7X Mark I and Mark II. I've used the G7X Mark III. I think it has some issues. The autofocus isn't quite there. It does have an external microphone jack, which is why it is seen as a competitor, but overall, the lens is not as good. The picture quality is not as good. The video is definitely not as good. It's got some serious issues with video in 4K. Overall, Canon is trying and is doing it on a much cheaper level, but it really doesn't compete. I don't think that camera is worth the money at all. It's got some serious flaws in it. The G5X Mark II also has some issues I really don't like. It doesn't have the microphone in jack. It's also got some autofocus issues, so I don't really love that camera. For $1,299, really you're getting into some upper echelon mirrorless cameras and some DSLRs that would probably destroy the image quality of this little RX100 VII, but you're getting in a much bigger package. So there's really not much on the market can compete pound for pound with the RX100 VII. I think size, form factor, and quality put together, there is no competition for the RX100 VII aside from the RX100 V. Now that is a very comparable camera that you can get for a very good price on the used market right now. If you don't need the microphone jack, if you don't need high quality audio, or if you can get away with external audio recording, I would say the RX100 V may be a better camera. You're getting the faster lens. You're getting the built-in ND filter. You're getting 90% of the features of the RX100 VII for a cheaper price. You do lose the 24 to 200 zoom length. You only get 24 to 70, but you get a faster lens, just as good image quality. That's a really good bang for the buck camera. I really love the RX100 V. I owned it for years and I really loved it. So I would say that's the biggest competitor. The RX100 VI, don't even bother. If you're gonna spend that much, just get the 7. M50 from Canon. That's a good little camera too for probably half the price of this. It is small, it's an interchangeable lens system, so it's not pocketable. So I wouldn't say it really directly competes, but it's very small. It does almost everything that the RX100 VII can do. Now, here's the key though. With the M50, you have to really put it up with if you were to get a zoom length of 24 to 200, because that would be what this would compete with. So if you got a good zoom, now you're talking about 700 for the body and then probably another $400 or $500 on a good zoom, and you're almost up to what you'd spend on the RX100 VII. So overall, I'd say yes, the M50 is a good camera, but bang for your buck, if you're gonna put it up with the same focal length as this RX100 VII, you're probably not gonna beat it, and I would say get the RX100 VII. Is this camera right for you? I think this camera is the best B camera that's ever come out. I think it is the best pocketable camera that has ever come out. If size is a priority for you, which it should be as a vlogger because it's much easier to just pull this out and start vlogging in a group or in public with a small form factor, then this is the best vlogging camera that's ever come out. It's definitely the best travel camera because you fit so much in such a big zoom range in such a small package. It's awesome for travel. It's awesome for families. The autofocus can nail all your kids' soccer games, and it's got eye autofocus for pets. It does that very well. It's amazing for YouTubers. I love it as a studio camera. You can see I shot this whole review on the RX100 VII, so you can see how awesome it is for that. For those professional photographers or videographers, I will say buy this camera, spend the money, have it in your bag, keep your spouse happy, shoot your family, shoot your friends, bring it with you everywhere you go, document your life. I think that's what photography and videography is all about, and this camera will make it easier for you to do that. And that is why I bought it. I have a horrible memory. I want to document everything in my life, but I didn't want to carry around my giant gear. So I bought this, and I'm absolutely in love with it. I think it's a wonderful purchase, and I think it's worth every cent. So 2 years down the line, when I sell it for $1,000 and buy something else, I'm not losing that much money anyway. That brings me to the conclusion here. Thank you for watching this review. I very much appreciate it. If you want to purchase this camera or check out more customer reviews, please click the link below. That really helps me out. That's it. That's all I got for you for the RX100 VII. I appreciate you stopping by. Drop me a comment or a link below. A link? Don't leave me a link. No, leave me a comment and let me know what you think of the RX100 VII or some other cameras that you think can compete with it. Thank you again. I appreciate you being here. Till next time, peace. How's this little lab mic? Because I kind of love it. It's like 20 bucks on Amazon. Lab mic's on point right now. I'm gonna put that out there. Just saying.